As Shannon's told you, I'm Scott MacQueen, the head of preservation for the archive, and welcome to Saturday Night Zombie. While zombies are ubiquitous in today's pop culture, we aren't going to subject you to the modern contemporary flesh-eating revenants of the George Romero school, typified by The Walking Dead and sundry other offspring. 2015 has already boasted upwards of 54 zombie flicks in the last 12 months, including The Co-ed and the Zombie Stoner, Pro Wrestlers versus Zombies, Revenge of the Bimbo Zombie Killers, and Zombievers. As a necessary corrective, we offer you the first zombie movies ever made, back when zombies were creatures of voodoo, not Epicurus, just merely obedient. A cocktail called the Zombie was invented in 1934 here in Hollywood by Don the Beachcomber. It was likely inspired by tonight's main bout, Our Pleasure, White Zombie. White Zombie is Poverty Row's most famous horror movie, produced quickly and cheaply by the brother team of Victor and Edward Halperin to capitalize on the 1932 horror movie vogue that was begun by Bela Lugosi in Dracula the year before. Zombie was shot in under 2 weeks for $62,500 with financing put together by Phil Goldstone, most of it in promissory notes. Goldstone rented studio space at Universal, letting the movie utilize superior technical and support facilities. His critical coup was securing Bela Lugosi, Dracula himself, as his star. Lugosi is reported to have been paid $900 for perhaps a week's work. In his twilight years, Bela complained bitterly about the salary and the fact that the picture made millions for the producers. Now, $900 a week was a very good salary for a freelance actor in the Depression days of 1932. Its buying power close to $15,000 in today's money. A working-class stiff, if he even had a job in 1932, was lucky to make $1,600 a year. Bela had in fact been paid $1,000 for a week's work by Fox in Women of All Nations just the year before. Though the Halperins' movie drew its energy from William Seabrook's best-selling 1929 book about Haitian voodoo, The Magic Island, is really a fairy tale in disguise. White Zombie has always seemed to me to be an incredibly two-brained film, its reach far exceeding its grasp. At times I feel that I watch it and it's utterly risible, like a high school pageant mounted by giddy teenagers who've been drinking Ripple, and they've gone to the attic and found Grandma's cast-offs. And other times I'm really pricked by its odd magic. Zombie looks recherche in its style and execution, like a Byronic echo from the 19th century. Even in 1932, it looked old-fashioned. Everything feels secondhand and passé, from the scene doc set pieces to the washed-up silent movie hero and heroine, both of whom had peaked in the early 20s, and the recycled silent movie cues, many of which are at least 10 or more years old. The optical effects are awful and the sound recording a little better. And yet, it's supposed to be set in contemporary 1932 Haiti, but anachronisms abound. The plantation owner dresses in 19th century Regency garb, like he's going to go fox hunting, and he lights the mansion with candles. The Christian missionary sounds like a refugee from the Yiddish theater in the Lower East Side. Off-screen Haitian natives hum an American Negro spiritual that was written by a man from Niagara Falls. We're in the sweltering tropics, but there's frost on the actor's breath. It's cold on those unheated Universal City stages in the middle of winter. The local voodoo sorcerer is a white man with a Hungarian accent. He keeps a South African jaguar head on his desk. He lives in a soaring castle bigger than Downton Abbey. His tonsorial style looks like he was stranded in the islands while touring in a pocket edition of Faust in 1895. When not attired in the costume of a native bullcorder, he braves the tropical heat in white tie and tails. He drapes his sleepwalking lady friend in floor-sweeping fairy tale gowns. And yet, the dialogue alternates between pop poetry and the cringeworthy. Don the Beachcomber might suggest a drinking game every time Robert Fraser goes, "No, not that!" The Hungarian Bokor's zombie militia are white zombies of mixed European stock, costumed like refugees from every operetta of the 1920s. Tinker, tailor, soldier, spy. Everyone seems to wear a cape. And yet, there is that irrational back-of-the-head magic. Performances and line readings worthy of bad regional dinner theater, suddenly segue into camera moves and imagery that define cinema, and they're raised to heights of grandeur by that fruity Gustav Brock stock music. The awful optical effects and the attempts at sound, silence, and music being used creatively, that's the admirable reach that's not quite grasped. But art is seldom about mechanical perfection. And then there's Lugosi. Dracula may be Bela's signature role. Igor, I think, is his best performance, but he was never more commanding than in White Zombie. He plays his role as if he were Placido Domingo in Darkest of Verdi, singing his lines with eccentric energy, electric fervor. And after 80 years, it still rings down the corridors of time. A crazy critical mass is reached in White Zombie. It was reviled when it was new and sneered at for decades until it was rehabilitated in the 1960s by scholars like William K. Everson, Carlos Clarence, and Arthur Lenig. It was a red-haired stepchild from the start. Even as production wound down in 1932, the creditors came calling. Universal attached the film for $8,600 still owed them. Attempts to place it with a distributor failed because of those outstanding debts. Enter Sherman Krelberg, a New York lawyer, exhibitor, and distributor of low-rent fare. His amusement securities company bought up White Zombie and set up a distribution deal with United Artists. Goldstone was able to pay off Universal, the Halperins got $80,000 and a percentage, and Krelberg became White Zombie's master. Those producer millions Bela always talked about, they're a myth. Bela may have spread the rumor, but Krelberg started it. To paint himself as financially injured when he sued the Halperin brothers over Revolt of the Zombies in 1936, he fibbed in court and claimed a $1.75 million gross, of course, presenting no account ledgers. The UA ledgers show that White Zombie actually earned $369,916 worldwide. Thank you, Carl Thiede. That's the gross, not the net. It's a very healthy return on a $62,000 investment, but far below the million-plus take grosses of Frankenstein and Dracula. But too late, Shermy had already printed the legend. And of course, there were lawsuits. A play called Zombie had a brief outing in New York and Chicago just before the movie opened. It was written by Kenneth Webb, brother of the RKO staff composer Roy Webb, who would score Val Luden's I Walked with the Zombie a decade later. Do you see how tangled the yarn gets? In May 1936, Krelberg recovered the domestic rights and the copyright from United Artists. Then in August 1938, he took back the foreign rights. Though a lavender master positive and a duplicate negative for Europe had been made in 1932, Krelberg kept grinding up prints from the heavily patched original negative all through the 1930s, 40s, and 50s, squeezing every last nickel out of the nitrate. Prints in whatever condition were bicycled state to state to cover show dates. Even in 1932, those 35-millimeter prints cost $96 each. Krelberg worked his zombie to death, reaping every shekel he could, sometimes simply a $10 guarantee from a rural theater. Zombie became progressively shoddier and tattered until the camera negative burned in New York in a storage fire in 1955, along with Krelberg's negatives for The Lost City and Buck Rogers' Planet Outlaws, among others. Krelberg had no backup preprint. Worse, he'd neglected to renew his copyright. Which begs the question, whatever happened to White Zombie? As public domain buccaneers duped aging 16-millimeter TV prints in the 1960s, Krelberg stuck to his legal fiction of ownership while frantically searching for material to put the film back in distribution. The master positive was gone. The nitrate dupe negative, sent from London to Paris in 1933, then back to Denham Laboratories in March of '39, was lost during World War II. By 1969, Krelberg did manage to find an old nitrate print from which an optical dupe negative was made at Gufanti Labs in New York. Krelberg's Goodwill Systems Exchange brokered a deal with exploitation maven Joseph Brenner, who paired White Zombie with Freaks under a spurious quitclaim from Raymond Rohauer. That midnight double bill, I remember it well. I was in ninth grade reading The Village Voice at the library. It played all the marijuana-infested theaters in Greenwich Village in 1970 and then toured the college circuit throughout America. After his death, Krelberg's library passed to Elvin Feltner, another colorful character. He was from Krypton, Kentucky. He owned Florida TV stations and the Palm Beach Stingrays, and he bought up film libraries. Irvin refused to pay broadcast royalties to Columbia Pictures for television shows he was running on his stations. In the 1990s, he was hit for damages approaching $32 million. Shortly thereafter, his Tennessee warehouse burned in what was whispered to be an insurance fire. Once again, White Zombie entered the purifying flames, now in the company of the PRC camera negatives. In the 1990s, Mike Vraney of Something Weird Video was on the trail of Joseph Brenner's negatives. Vraney got to the lab 1 week after everything hit the dumpsters. Was White Zombie among them? In 2008, Philip Hopkins of the Film Chest came across 35mm rolls of White Zombie in Feltner's humid storage facility in West Palm Beach. They were hockey pucks, utterly useless. Phoenix-like, White Zombie is resurrected tonight from the best surviving materials. It has been assembled on a shot-by-shot basis with these hands. From 4 reels of a nitrate print, a badly damaged 1952 safety print, 2 reels of dupe negative, and 2 of those Joseph Brenner reissue prints. We thank all of those who have made this possible, from institutions like the Library of Congress to the generosity of individuals like Greg Luce and Sam Sherman. None of this would have been possible without the financial support of the Packard Humanities Institute. Tonight's 35mm print still exhibits scratches and analog flaws, but the photography is now preserved with a polyester negative that should last 500 years. Additional digital cleanup remains a viable option. The sound is the best it will ever be and is superior to what would have been heard in 1932. As I explained, it was a horribly recorded film, and we've been able to address many of those issues. Now, a word about versions. White Zombie has always been rumored to be missing substantial footage. At 68 minutes and 2 seconds, the version you see tonight is the most complete anywhere, exactly as the picture opened on Broadway at the Rivoli Theater, July 28, 1932. We have restored snippets of dialogue and extensions of scenes that have been lost to damage in all other circulating copies. The legend originates in 1932 press materials that gave a running time of 73 minutes. A telegram from United Artists Hollywood to the New York office 2 weeks before the opening makes the situation clear. The print that UA in New York was holding, the preview print, was 6,800 feet. As of July 13th, the negative was now 6,400 feet. Taking into account the billing footage, here's the distinction between a 73-minute and a 68-minute runtime. In a picture where each reel runs a very full 1,800 feet, reel 3 is only 435 feet, and is so marked in the original lab leaders at the head. That's where the 400 missing feet, the cuts were made, one big block, between Beaumont's visit to Lugosi and the preparations for the wedding. The scenes are believed to be non-dialogue sequences of zombies toiling in the fields. The head of Madge's dressing scene is gone. Originally, she remarked on the sweltering heat and asked the maid to open the window. The scene now begins with a chemical fade-in and goes right to Madge, alarmed in her panties, demanding the windows be shut against those threatening tom-toms. These cuts were made before release and picked up the pace of the story. Other moments that should be missing aren't. In 1935, the Production Code Administration instructed UA and Krellberg for a reissue they had to make 5 cuts to get code certification. They demanded the cut of the close panning shot up Chauvin's naked legs up to his hairy chest, the later close-up of bullet holes in said hairy chest, and all shots of Madge Bellamy in her step-ins, as they called her little nylons in her panties, as they called her lingerie, all shots of said Madge Bellamy in her coffin, and all the close-ups of Lugosi's eyes. Krellberg nodded and ignored them. The shots were never taken out of the negative. White Zombie's back-of-the-head magic is perhaps best not explicated, but simply appreciated and mediated through the subconscious. Pretend it's 1934, you're seeing White Zombie in a sub-run after having knocked back several of the zombies at Dawn the Beachcombers, and declare in unison with Madge Bellamy's doe-eyed Cupid doll heroine when she says, "Neil, I dreamed." Let's all dream. And be sure to remain after the interval for the flip side, the dark twin of White Zombie called Wanga. One last note, you're the first audience since 1932 to see Zombie in its correct aspect ratio, which is the 1:18 movie tone ratio. It's a little bit taller than the conventional frame. It was made right during that transition. Everything else is cropped, the top and bottom slightly. So you're seeing it as no one has since 32.